item you want to discuss that's on the agenda, or?
Mic is not on.
That
She's
one?
on item
That's what I
2.
thought. Okay.
Cell
So
phones.
seeing none, we'll move to consent calendar.
I'd like to remind everybody about their
Cell phone. Not yours.
Not
everybody
yours.
else. We wanted you to announce it to everyone.
Please turn your cell phones off.
Or unstunned as appropriate.
I love when we do that when there's more people on the dais than in the audience.
Well, and in the room who are, yeah.
They all got their mics on.
All right, looking at the minutes of February 5th, anyone have any comments?
I was absent, so I can't comment.
I think it says that.
Yep.
I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
That's me. 1.
Okay. Passes 6-1. Moving to the first matter for public hearing, 14 DL 02, 980 Covington Road. Start with the staff report.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. This project before you here, we are looking at a 2-lot subdivision, and it also includes a variance application and a historic structure, or multiple historic structures. This property, which is located at 980 Covington Road, is a designated historic resource. It has a main house and a water tower tank house that are both considered historic structures. This property was, as first step, it did go to the Historical Commission, as noted in the report. It was reviewed by the Historical Commission and recommended for approval at their meeting last September. As a condition of approval and as part of the future work on the house, it would go back to the Historical Commission to review the specific architectural details and specifications for the full scope of the remodel and addition. But before you tonight, there is a historic permit or a historic review permit. We're also looking at a variance related to moving the historic structure. The variances would include allowing the existing historic structure and the tank house to exceed the height limits for main houses and accessory structures. They do currently, and it would recognize that since they're being moved, it would allow those heights to remain. There would also be a variance to allow the house to encroach into the daylight plane on the new property line that's being created between this house, which is moving to the corner, and the new interior lot that's being created. And then also there would be a second-story side yard setback to encroach into that same setback. It would be slight. It would be about, I believe, 9 inches, 10 inches, 16'9", where 17.6 is required. And this is more of it's an existing second-story, more of a substandard, kind of an attic space, but it does have a window, so it is considered a second floor. So the main project here before you is a 2-lot subdivision. It would create a corner lot of approximately 11,300 square feet, an interior lot of approximately 10,015 square feet. Staff is recommending approval, subject to the findings and conditions. And with that, I am available if you have any questions.
Zach, could you talk a little bit about the function of the water tower?
I had a question along that line, too, because the water tower seems to be part of the existing garage. There's a lot of echo in here. I don't know if we can turn the volume down a little bit.
What?
So the existing tank house, and I'll let the applicant speak to it further. There's the original water tower, and then there's a non-historic addition that kind of was built around all 4 sides at the base to kind of create that current garage. And so the proposed plan would remove that non-historic addition, leaving the original tank house to remain, and then it would move it forward closer to Miramonte and then build a new detached garage adjacent to it. But the goal would be to preserve the tank house as basically in a kind of a shop add-on to the new garage, and the second floor would be used as attic storage only.
Is there actually a water tank inside?
No, I believe at one point there was a water tank on top, but it has been removed. And so it just is basically the structure that originally supported the water tank. And
Okay.
originally, this was part of, this house and this water tower were originally on a 70-acre fruit ranch back in the early 1900s when it was developed. And so this water tower has already been moved once. It was located elsewhere on the property, and it's been subdivided over the years. And during one of the larger subdivisions that created, I would imagine, closer to the configuration that you see now, it was moved to remain with the original house.
I have some questions regarding the findings. So it says that the design of the subdivision will not conflict with access easements, and I'm not that well versed on what is an access easement?
So, for example, if there was a parcel that needed an access easement across this property to get to, then we would need to make sure that that was properly addressed. But in this case, there are no easements over this property.
Okay, and then on the conditions, number 6 says all existing trees on the site are protected and shall not be removed unless approved by the city. And I noticed that in your staff report, tree number 44 and 21 were mentioned that they would be removed. So that seems, I don't know, it's not like all existing trees are going to be protected. It's actually all.
So we could clarify that, but the intent is that the subdivision, you're looking at the subdivision application, and this, if this is approved, they will need to come back through the design review process to move the house, and there is a second-story balcony or a second-story addition included. So it would go through the design review process, go to the design review commission, the historical commission, and as part of that application, we would review the those 2 tree removals. But we can modify that condition since they would need to be removed as part of the house relocation.
So I guess that was, well, I'll ask my second question, and then I have another question from what you just said. Number 7 says all existing fencing within the Miramonte Avenue public street right-of-way shall be removed. And the fencing is intertwined with the bushes, so I don't know what the intent is for the removal of the fence, or of the fence, and not, why wouldn't you include the bushes as well?
Because you're allowed to put bushes in the right-of-way, but you're not allowed to build a fence.
That is the answer. Basically, I mean, vegetation is allowed in the public right-of-way. Fencing and structures need to be contained within a property. So in this case, if you look at the tentative map, which is the second sheet, you can see the fencing that encroaches into the Miramonte Avenue right-of-way. So the intent of that condition is, as part of the subdivision, that fencing would be relocated to the property line or removed.
So the fencing along Covington is then inside the property, because part of my questions is because the corner at Covington and Miramonte, as you probably are aware, is a major collecting point for all the students. And it would seem like I don't know if we're going to remove things, if we could think about the removal of all that area so that when the city comes to make that enlarged in some way, and I know that there have been plans we've talked about, that we would, if they're going to remove trees, why not remove, fences?
Well, I know Public Works is moving forward and looking at a project. I know it was looking at a signalized intersection and then pedestrian and improvements. So as part of whatever project comes forward there, they'll be able to deal with the public right-of-way as best fit to add those improvements. So in this case, we're just looking at removing a non-conforming fence. We're not getting into the function of that intersection as part of this. Public Works is moving forward and looking at design alternatives for this intersection.
But don't we have a zoning aspect that says that there has to be a clear view corridor at the corner of intersections, and people are not permitted to allow extensive growth that blocks drivers' view?
Yes, we could. Engineering did review this as part of the initial staff review, and they didn't identify a vegetation removal, but if the commission wants to include that as a condition, you definitely can.
I mean,
But
there's
I think that
a
would
huge
be-
amount of vegetation.
Yeah, and it may have been something we were looking at other things and we didn't get into it, but if you want to add a condition to make sure that our visibility triangle at that intersection is met, we can definitely incorporate that.
And so what's before us tonight is the splitting or is the subdivision of the property, but not the structure itself or what gets built in the structure, in the other part of the parcel. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a subdivision, you're establishing a building envelope on each of these parcels. Obviously, the house has to be moved, and there's a variance associated with the daylight plane and those nonconformities, so those are bundled with the subdivision because you couldn't approve the subdivision if you weren't also approving those variances. But the work done to the house will go through the city's design review process and isn't a part of this approval tonight.
And my last part is, what about the pool that's kind of going to be in between the two properties? Is that part of a condition, or does it,
It would
I
need
know
to be
it'll be
removed.
filled in.
It was shown to be removed, but we can clarify that with a condition that
Have you seen the
obviously
pool?
it would need to be removed before the map could be recorded.
I haven't looked at- I looked at it
The pool
from-
needs to be removed.
Yeah, it's-
I just
it
noticed
crosses
it's
the property
right
line.
across the property line. If we're going to agree that we're going to subdivide this property, the pool seems like you can't
Has
have
a small
that.
problem. There's a dotted line right down the middle.
Exactly.
No, there'll be a net there. So, Zach,
Go ahead.
so I'm just wondering if we're not setting ourselves up for more trouble later on with tree number 20. The way this is broken up, tree number 20 is right in the middle of where someone is going to build on Lot A.
Yes.
Yes.
That is correct.
That is correct.
The arborist report is, it's a very big, mature tree, and it definitely however, it's multi-trunk, and in the arborist report, it's rated as fair. And so we didn't identify this as a tree that rose to the level where we would want to adjust the building envelope to preserve it. However, we don't necessarily want to remove it just because it's in the building envelope. We would rather note that obviously it's not specifically protected, but it would need a tree removal permit, and we would want to understand the design of a house on this property before we approve its removal. And perhaps a future owner would look at this and want to design a house around it.
But isn't that part of the condition?
Yeah, it is protected, and we wouldn't approve its removal until we had a design review application for a new house.
You agree?
But it's not like it's a heritage oak or some tree that we say, look, this tree has to be protected. And at that point, we would actually modify the building envelope.
Don't we have a rule that says if the circumference is bigger than a certain amount, chest high, that the tree, irrespective of whether or not it's a species that's protected, the tree itself becomes protected?
Yes, and the only way you
This
can
is a
remove it is
huge
with a
tree.
permit. Yeah, it's a very large
I mean,
tree.
there's like a giant red arrow pointing at this thing saying, we're going to cut you down because we can't build a house there.
More than likely, this tree will be removed as part of future development, and that, if this property was just here and they submitted that arborist report and there was work, we would consider approving its removal based on the structure and that its vigor and health are
But
fair.
correct me if I'm wrong, we're not really voting on that. I mean, we're voting on the condition, and it's going to go to another committee to deal with that, correct?
Yeah, well, it depends.
That's not really part of what we're...
Yeah, no. What we're talking about is we're looking at a subdivision. And part of the subdivision is such that we're setting ourselves up for one of the lots of the remaining subdivision is going to, it's clear is going to have a future problem. So all I'm asking is, while we're doing this, we need to think about what this future problem is going to be. Because maybe we need to say that an equivalent tree, and I happen to know this because it happened at the end of my street when there was a large development at the end of my street a number of years ago, that this tree, when it is removed, will have to be replaced with a tree of similar size or a tree that will shortly become of similar size. That may be a condition we want to...
Is this
But Ken, why
matter
would you
for
put that in-
discussion, or is this?
I'm asking Zach,
question
I'm
for
trying
staff?
to get some dialogue with Zach here about what
Okay.
their thinking was when they did this. They put a line right down the middle, and we've already seen that the swimming pool is, part of that. But this tree, it just jumps out at you as we know it's going to be a problem. We know that they're going to be back. Someone is going to be back here in a year asking about that tree.
Yes, and we decided to not necessarily approve its removal and leave it as part of a future design review application, and we would evaluate its merits at that point, just like we would any property. If there was a large tree within the building envelope, we would evaluate its merits. Generally, we're always going to look to get replacement trees when you remove it's a policy, it's a design review finding, so it's something we would definitely factor in. So if the commission wants to add a requirement that, say, a minimum 24-inch box, Category 1 street tree be planted if this tree is removed, that would be appropriate, but staff
That's
would
what I was suggesting.
factor that in as part of a future design review for this lot.
Again, I do have a concern on that, because since we haven't seen what design might come to us for this property, I don't want us to put limitations. Is it a 24-inch box, or it will go through DRC.
It won't come to us.
It won't...
That's
Is that
fine.
correct?
But DRC
But we're
is
making it a
there to,
condition.
the
We can
DRC
make
is
it a
there.
condition, Malcolm. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think ahead.
I know, but what I'm saying is,
Condition.
whenever in the city projects have come through and we've removed some of these very prominent trees, the city always requires for them to replant. What I'm saying is, I'm okay with the replanting, but if we say 24-inch or specify something, That, because we don't know the design, I don't think we should. It might
Okay.
be 3, it might be 1, we don't know.
I'm gonna jump in.
If the homeowner is willing to plant a substantial tree.
I'm going to, stop,
Yeah.
stop. I'm going to jump in now. We're going to table a discussion about whether and what we do in terms of conditions for a tree. If someone has a specific question for staff related to their report before the applicant has been able to speak or the public has been able to speak, please ask it now.
So the other question I had, Zach,
Good
is
move.
the building, the setbacks between the two lots, is it Lot B, the house, I don't know, the subdivision that's going to occur, is that the back of Lot B, or is that the side of Lot B?
That is the side. So you've got a side yard, this property line is considered a side property line for both properties.
Okay.
The front of Lot B is facing Covington, the exterior side is Miramonte, and the rear is opposite Covington, and then so the interior side is opposite Miramonte.
So then the setbacks for each of those structures would be a side structure, would be side, and the...
Yeah, it would be 10 feet for Lot A and 10 feet for Lot B.
So the house is actually going to be rotated 90 degrees when it's moved.
Yes, it will be moved and rotated 90 degrees in order to get within the building envelope of Lot B.
Any other questions?
So does that mean the rear yard setback is going to be what?
25.
Well, the rear yard
Well,
setback...
Not as you define rear yard, but the rear yard, between the rear yard of the house when it's reoriented and the adjacent property line will be how big?
Well, it's not a rear yard anymore, it would become a side yard. For the purposes of zoning, functionally, they can use it how they would.
I understand the purposes of zoning, but you're telling me, I think, that the rear of the house, when it's rotated, to the property line will be 10 feet?
Yeah, well, it would be 13 feet 9 inches, but the minimum is 10 feet.
10 is
That's
required.
a pretty small rear yard setback.
It's not rear.
It is rear to the house, whether it is rear to the way the city defines,
Or zoning in general. It's not just our city design.
right.
Right.
But
It's rear, but it's, the rear of the house is, the front of the house faces Covington, not Miramonte.
Correct, and the rear setback is 30 feet, and required is 25.
Who's counting?
Correct. And the side
all
yard is
right,
10.
all right.
John is complaining
That's what I'm
that
trying to-
Yeah, so
principle
John
is
is,
not the same as
so this
practice.
is just a side, just because it's a
Okay,
corner lot.
fine. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
Any other
all right,
questions?
thank you.
I thought it was a great report, Zach.
One question from me. At our last meeting and memorialized in our minutes, there was a suggestion by me that we add the number of properties that have been noticed for project. And if you have that information, I think it'd be helpful to know. How many people were noticed for this project?
I can get you that in just a moment.
I didn't even notice the project.
Properly?
81 properties were noticed.
81 properties received notice about this. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Big turnout.
Okay. All right, why don't we hear from the applicant?
My name's Walter Chapman. I'm the designer. Thank you, Commissioners, for hearing this project this evening. Zach's report is very thorough because we've been working on this property for probably 2 years before it got to you. Like I said, we went through historical last year in September. So a lot of effort has gone into this to make sure that we were doing this, approaching this the right way. And part of that is the reason we're stripping off the old garage that's around the water tower is because you can't see the water tower anymore. It's been encased with, a very awkward structure. So what we're trying to do, not only in the process of moving the house, is we're trying to get it back to some historical context as far as the house, its relationship to the water tower, its relationship to the garage, by diminishing the garage and putting it in the back and not having it currently in the front yard and the water tower. So this was also worked out with the historian as far as there's the copy of the report here. The issue of the variances, really, it's the height of the structure because the building's taller than is allowed today. The daylight plane is a similar issue. The portion of the second story that's being referred to as being in the second story setback is actually a small dormer attic. And in fact, there's no access to that except through an access door. So recently, zoning rules have been changed in Los Altos to treat dormers that are within the 17.5-foot setback to be treated as second floor exceptions. That wasn't the case when we actually started this process. So the main point is the exception for the second story setback is not a room that anyone will ever be in. You would have to actually go through an attic access to get into the attic to that dormer window. So we really have tried to make sure that we weren't asking for exceptions to setbacks, floor area ratios. We've been able to work with all the trees with the exception of 2 birch trees that are currently in the front of the house. I'm not sure, John could probably even tell you when those trees were planted because the property owner has been there for many years. So unless there's questions pertaining to the approach that was taken, I would like to give the property owner to speak a little bit about why he's here and how he came to this solution for the property. I think that was clarified, what was the front and rear side setbacks. So
Will we have questions afterwards for both parties? Okay.
Sure. Hi, I'm John Walker. I'm the property owner, 980 Covington Road. Thank you for hearing us. This project actually began, in my mind, some years ago, probably 1989, Loma Prieta. You may remember that. I remember that because I was very concerned. I wasn't home at the time of the earthquake, but was very concerned whether my house would be standing. It was. There was some damage, but not extensive, thank goodness. But there was some movement of the foundation. So that's been a concern. And over the years since then, I've considered a variety of things. More recently, it really comes down to where this project began, was trying to think about how I could fix the foundation problem. The foundation is old concrete, it's powdery. The house is not bolted to the foundation. It won't take a bolt because it powders. I've had several people attempt to do various things. So the solution to it is a very expensive fixing of it. I can't afford to do that. It would be several $100,000. I've had contractors come out and look at it. And there would be a lot of things involved. So trying to think about how I could preserve the house. I have lived in the house since 1978. We have protected the house. We've done a variety of things to it to keep it in good shape. We respect the historical nature of it. So what became apparent after thinking about it and talking to it, and Walter gave us some thoughts, as did some other people, was that if I've got to lift it up to fix a foundation, why don't I just move it? And then I could subdivide it, create the funds to be able to put the money into the house. I can correct a few other things, such as the placement of the water tower to the back of the house instead of the front. The front of the house could actually face Covington Road instead of the back of the house facing Covington. There are a number of things that could be fixed by doing this, so it seemed like an appropriate thing to do. So that's kind of how we came about. And as to trees, I love trees. I grew up in Atlanta. We got a lot of trees in Atlanta, so all but 3 trees on the property we planted. The bay was not one of them. Be happy to answer any questions at this point.
I have a question.
Yes.
I noted in the report that it indicates that your house is actually not designated as a historic landmark.
Right.
And I'm wondering whether that's a process you are interested in going through, or?
It's something that we've discussed, we've talked about. I've talked with planning about it, and I think it's something to be considered. I clearly wouldn't want to further encumber it yet.
Understood.
But once this change is made, I think it could be considered. Might be a good idea.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand, because I'm not an architect and looking at these drawings, I do the best I can. But essentially, in the back of the house, there's going to be a new structure? Is that how I see?
Oh, good.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I said. If you can go to page 1, actually.
Yeah.
So there's that gray area at the very top, and I'm trying to understand the setback to that says to that word Lot B, and and then there's going to be something new, and then the house is going to be switched, and I'm trying to understand all.
So when the house is reoriented to face Covington and the water tower is built, the objective here was to do the addition to the historical building in a location where it doesn't draw attention to itself.
Okay.
The idea when you're adding on to historical residence, federal guidelines are basically say you do an addition that is similar but not identical to the architecture of the historical building. So 100 years from now, someone comes down the street and they'll see the historical building, and the addition is tucked nicely behind the building and behind the water tower so as not to diminish the character of the main structure. Interestingly enough, there's a house out at the farm in the East Bay where you arrive and you see this gorgeous house, and behind it you see this odd, what looks like an addition. And it was actually the reverse. The building in the front wasn't the historical building. Someone built this grand house in front of a historical building, and now everyone who arrives there, they can't tell which is which. So the goal here is to make sure that when this is all said and done, the historical house has its prominence, and the addition is again tucked way out of sight. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess my question is similar to what was earlier, was that the 25 feet to the back of the house, that setback, are you asking for a variance for that?
No, we actually are closer. I think we're at 30 feet to the new rear property line.
Including the addition?
Yes.
And is that where the
It's
water
30 feet.
tower?
30 feet. See, it's right here. That's 30 feet. That's
Okay.
30.
Yeah, so again, all the originals, the historical building, when it's relocated, and when the additions are
Gotcha.
done, will all meet the required setbacks, and the addition meets all the current zoning rules. And again, it was a challenge to do it in such a way as to not have it visible but still meet the needs. This house doesn't have an actual kitchen. It was a box. If you see the historical house today, there is a flat roof structure that was built on the back of the house. And it's been a little tiny galley kitchen that the Walkers had lived with since the 70s. And so one of the goals of this was to remove this box that was added on with a kitchen, I'm not sure when, in the early 1900s. And this, that was also part of the goal of the remodel, is to get the house a kitchen and a family room and modern amenities, again, without altering the original building.
And then, so the new garage, is that, and maybe this is a question for staff, is that not included as part of a setback? Because I noticed that seems to be close to the back of
It's a
the,
detached accessory structure.
Yes, detached accessory structures are allowed within a rear yard setback, and so in
Okay.
this case, it meets the exterior side yard setback. And for structures up to 12 feet in height, they need a 7-foot 6-inch setback from the rear property line, as long as they have a 10-foot separation from the main house. So in this case, they just achieved their 10-foot separation, and then thus they're allowed to be within the rear yard setback as close as 7.5.
and then we're approving that the structure itself, because the water tower is 26 feet, is part of that structure, that's the variance that we're...
Yeah, so there's two height variances. One is for the main house, which exceeds the 27-foot
Right.
height limit, and then the other one is for the water tower, which exceeds the 12-foot height limit for accessory structures.
I have a question for Walter, which is, will this house still be potentially eligible for a Mills Act designation with this addition that you're proposing in the back?
I don't believe we've compromised that. That I would have to actually ask Zach, because I think he's more familiar with all the Mills Act requirements than I.
I was sort of looking his way, too.
But we've had that discussion. It would make sense, I think, all the way around, that with the house being moved and being restored, because, like I say, with the funds available, John can finally do what he's wanted to do with the house for years. And once it's been restored to that nature, hopefully, the house will be maintained and well-kept, and so there's no way to expand it again or alter it, because it's pretty much met all the zoning maximum development, so.
And Walter, the new...
Wait, I didn't
Oh,
hear.
sorry,
I
didn't
need
get
to
her
hear
answer on the
Zach's
Mills Act yet.
Answer.
So, yes, based on the historic report, and obviously the addition remodel would go back to Historical Commission. The goal is that the historic integrity or the physical integrity and historic significance of the structure is maintained. And as outlined in the report, this is eligible to be designated as a landmark, and it could enter into a historic preservation agreement under the Mills Act.
And I have one more comment, which is, it was very common to not have kitchens because fire was the biggest problem, because there was no fire department and no water. So they always put the kitchens away from everything else, so when they caught fire, you wouldn't lose the house.
I still remember that watching Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Great.
Ms. Scarlett?
All right, if no more...
I did have a question.
Yeah.
So the new water tower structure is actually going to be attached to the new garage.
Well, yeah, the original structure is all there, and what has happened when the old garage was built, if you go inside that old garage, the siding had been removed from the base of the water tower, so you see the old original structures, stilts. So when we demolish the old garage, they relocate it to its new footing, then they'll put the siding back on to repair it to, again, its former appearance. And then the detached garage, we're going to use the attached garage to the detached water tower will then have a different siding on it, so that, again, someone will look at it and say, oh, look at this old water tower, and someone built a garage next to it.
Got it. This is a very clever design, by the way.
We've worked hard on this,
Yeah.
so we're glad to get to this point, believe me. So I will
Great.
take a seat if there's no other questions.
All right, let's move to public comment. Janet Brandt, please introduce yourself and state your address.
My address is 970 Covington, which is right next door to John's, on Covington, away
Zach,
from...
can you go to the map on the very first page of the report, and maybe she can point out where her house is?
So I'm the property right next door to him. He's on the corner, and I'm next door.
Toward Covington Court.
So you're on Covington Road, use the blue space, or
Yeah, I
the first
face-
house past the blue.
He's the blue, and I'm right next to the little green one.
So you'll be the one with the next to the garage and the tower.
No.
No, next to
No,
the
no,
main
there's
lot.
You're
nothing.
the opposite.
She's next to the empty lot.
She's next to
You're-
lot A.
I'm going to be next to the empty lot,
Empty
and the
lot
thing that I
with the
didn't
swimming
realize
pool.
is that the footprint of that new lot will be 10 feet from the fence, which is where they could build a house. which
Potentially.
Could be only 10 feet from where my house is.
Did
So
you
that-
actually receive notice? I heard you mention
No,
something about
I
that
did not.
earlier. Zach?
We'll have to, you can come by later. I mean, looking at the mailing list, there is an address label for Janet Brandt at 970 Covington, so a postcard was mailed to that address, but I don't know what happened.
I came to City Hall a couple months ago and gave them my mailing address, which is San Diego, and they said they had that. And they said they would mail something to me at my mailing address, which they showed me, which was in San Diego. And I didn't get anything.
Okay. I mean, we go off of assessor records, so we can get that updated so you're included in the council mail.
Anyway, my other neighbor told me about it. So the problem that I have is at the corner of the driveway that exists right now, which is where the new property line is going to, new property footprint is going to be, I have a 100-year oak tree, and it sits right on the property line, but on my property, not
Number
on John's.
23.
And I'm working with Walter, trying to get through the city to get that tree removed because it has oak tree
Fungus.
rot or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
fungus. And the city's already turned me down once to have the tree removed. And so my botanist has given them another report, and we're trying to do it again because I'm afraid that tree would fall on my house and crush people and everything else. But in the meantime, until they do allow me to do that, nothing could be dug underground or anywhere else to destroy the root base of that tree if they don't allow me to remove it. And that new property line is like right where that tree base is because it hangs over
23,
to the
yeah.
existing driveway. The canopy of the tree hangs over to my house halfway and then over to John's driveway. So Walter told me that my issue would be when they start talking about trees and the new structure and everything like that. But I just figured I'd give my 2 cents worth, because that tree is right on the baseline of our property.
Zach, I want to clarify, and I have a question for you, or maybe clarification, maybe Zach can help us. When you're saying the new property line, that is still the existing property line?
Yeah, exactly.
Or the piece you're going to sell off.
Well, it's still the existing property
Oh,
line
yeah,
between
right.
your
It's-
property and there. So the
Right.
property line hasn't moved.
No, but
Yeah.
I mean the new parcel that can be sold.
Correct.
Right.
But I just wanted to clarify,
right.
it's still the existing property
Oh,
line.
right.
And the oak tree, just for clarification, is that one in the bottom
Is the
right
circle at
corner?
the bottom.
And that's number 23 for, just for clarification that people want to read it at
You're
home.
seeing this one right here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So is your request to be able to remove the tree?
Well, I'm working, trying to get it removed because I'm afraid that if it has a dry fungus, whatever it is.
Oak root
that
fungus.
it
Oak root
could-
fungus.
Oak root
It could
fungus.
have damaged roots and it could fall. But if they don't allow me to remove it, and they've already turned me down before, then we have an issue with any kind of digging underground, under the driveway, anywhere, because the base of the roots of that tree go in, well into
Wouldn't that
20
solve your
feet in
problem?
that property. Pardon?
Wouldn't that solve your problem?
Not
I'm
if-
serious.
Not
I
if
mean,
it
that's
falls
a-
the other way, so.
No, it's facing towards my house. It'll
That's
crush
what
my
it's-
house and anybody in the house. So I'm trying to get it removed, but in the meantime, if they don't allow me to again, then we have an issue with
I
it.
don't think that's
So
some,
Janet, your concern is that if the property were subdivided, and although it was within John's right to build right up to that 10-foot line on the property of him, by himself, he never chose to because he had a historic house. But if it's subdivided, someone else may very well choose to use the whole buildable envelope.
Right.
And your concern is that in doing so, they would have to, in your mind, dig near this tree that would put your house in jeopardy. Am I getting the problem?
Right.
Okay, so that's something we can address here. But in fact, this is a good place to bring it up because this is first pass. But any property development that happened on Lot B, if this were to be a subdivision that went through, would be reviewed by the Design Review Committee,
and the arborist
assuming it
report.
was a two-story house. If it wasn't, it would be reviewed by staff. And so by being here tonight, you have it on the record that you have a concern. But whoever, whether it was John or someone else, he could have put another structure right there, 10 feet away from the property line, and he would perfectly be within his rights.
Right. Although, with the way Los Altos looks at trees and protection and all that stuff, I don't see how they could allow a structure rebuilt where it would destroy the roots of the tree that could make it fall down.
Well, in fact, you're quite right, and the buildable part of the lot is actually more towards the back, but it's a good thing to bring up.
Right, because the driveway has to go someplace.
Yeah.
The driveway that goes
Just
into that.
just to clarify, is your request simply to allow the removal of the tree as opposed to objection to the development at all?
Well, it's kind of like I'm in the middle, because I don't mind his subdivision, but if it destroys a tree that the city won't let me take down and it falls on my house, then it's
Got it.
then it's
Yeah,
a
but-
problem.
You want the tree
Then it
gone?
becomes civil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Got
I'm in
it,
the middle.
okay.
But,
Mike, can you pass that
actually, we see this, or the other part of the planning commission sees this kind of issue all the time. And although you kind of have to take it on faith a little bit, I mean, that's not going to happen. I understand your concern,
What is
which
not
is a
gonna happen?
legitimate concern.
The city will allow
It's
the
not
city
going to
to
happen
demolish
that the
it.
city is going to say, oh, yeah, just build right up to that tree, and, if you damage it and it falls over on the neighbor's house, well, we'll deal with that later. That's not going to happen. So I certainly understand that, and I think it's important that you came and spoke and brought it up. I'm not sure perhaps we could put something either in the minutes or in the conditions and findings, but I think from a practical point of view, I don't think you're in any danger. And I think if you had an arborist that said this tree is in imminent danger of falling over and squashing your house, I think the city would probably give you the permission to cut it down.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, but you're gonna
let's get back on
Very
track.
quickly on that note, we do have one of the staff coming out next Tuesday to look at the oak tree. We filed an application today with Janet to have the tree reviewed again for removal. So we're hoping next Tuesday that
Right.
once staff has seen the tree, she'll get the relief that she's looking for, independent of this body.
Thanks.
All right, seeing no other requests for public comment, I'm going to close it for discussion, and why don't we start on the left here?
All right. Well, first of all, I have to compliment the architect and the homeowners. This is not an easy subdivision. And it was, I mean, you've been in this house for nearly 40 years, and you really didn't have to, keep the historic nature of this house preserved. If you hadn't made those changes when you had moved in, this would not even be a historic significance. So you've really gone to a lot of length in saving that. So I think that's pretty commendable. And now you're trying to move it, which to me makes logical sense. It's a good retirement thing you've been, sitting on. And if it can give you the funds to actually maintain and enhance what's there and not fall apart around you, I think that's a clever idea. And I'm just going to focus on the things which are in front of us. I honestly think that the tree issue, there are a lot of projects which has come in front of us where this project, if it gets developed, the parcel, it would go through DRC. Hopefully, you won't even have that issue with the tree by next week, but if it is, we've done projects where, there are conditions from staff, if they have to hand dig around the tree and arborist reports, so it's pretty intense. So hopefully, you'll be fine there. But I'm focusing just on what's in front of us, which is the variance and the findings. And I think the nature of the project and to preserve how it looks and what it is, I think I'm actually perfectly happy to support the variance and the findings by staff. I know there were some concerns brought up about that big tree and if it should be removed. I'm okay if some of my fellow commissioners want to put in that, maybe if this tree is removed in future development, that some other trees are planted. I just don't want to see what size boxes or how many, because I would rely on DRC to see the design at that point, or the staff if it's a single-story home, and make those decisions. So I'm in support of the project.
I'm pretty impressed with the fact that the applicant has given this considerable thought. And it's pretty obvious if you just look at the conditions, that no matter what we vote here, that it's not a done deal. It's got to go through other reviews, and I feel that the conditions that the staff has indicated are adequate safeguards for further review on this development, and that what we're voting on today, I don't see any problem whatsoever. I think you. I forgot what your name is, sir, but John, I think it's very clever of you to arrive at this solution that not only takes care of the historical preservation, but also really allows you to fix your own house up. I mean, I think that's very clever, and my hat's off to you, and I can see that you planned it well, and I support it.
So many people in the community know that I am not only a fan of historic preservation, I own historic property, and I applaud your effort because it's hard owning an old house. It's a money pit. Even when you fix things, they need fixing again, and you got to love what you're doing. And so I applaud that and support that. However, I am not in favor of this subdivision, and I know as a practical matter I'm going to be in the minority. So I might as well speak my piece, because I do, as I said, foremost, your head is in the right place to to preserve it, and I think the plans that you're bringing forward make perfect sense. But every property that I've seen in Los Altos, mine included, where there has been a subdivision, has taken away from the historic context. And I look at the property on Rinconada, and it's a big house on a tiny lot. It's too small a lot. 500 University has been the property surrounding 500 University has been a bank account for many purposes over the years, and it's taken away from the historic context of the home. And so if I were in your position, would I perhaps do exactly the same thing? Very possibly. So I'm not faulting you, but on the other hand, I can't, in good conscience, vote for something that I know is wrong. And, you know, I've seen too many examples of this in the city, and it's a one-way street. Once it gets subdivided, it's gone forever. And so I respect what you're doing. I hope you respect the fact that I can't vote for this, because 20 years from now, I don't want to be able to say, you know, I voted for a subdivision that I don't think is respecting the historic structure and the context and the need to be bigger than what it is. So.
Okay. So I will start by saying that I can support the subdivision and the variances subject to the findings and conditions. I will say that general condition number 6 needs to be modified so it says all existing trees except the 2 previously noted are to be protected, because those 2 are going to be removed as part of the moving of the house. I am somewhat sanguine about arborist reports in general, but I'm glad to see that the applicant and the neighbor are working together for a common cause. I think that's good. We have no purview here to discuss a tree that's not on the property that's being discussed. I understand your concern, and I'm glad you spoke to it, because to approach some response to John's point, yes, it would be really nice if the big houses could be on big lots forever. I think that this was done with great sensitivity, and I think it really depends more on the fact, what will be developed depends more on the fact that economically, when you pay as much as you have to for land on the peninsula, you're not going to put up a modest structure in the back of the lot, which will look like part of a growth over a period of time of a farmhouse in an orchard setting. That's probably not going to happen. But someone could do that. My concern is that when we talk about orderly development, which is one of the basic findings for subdivision, I believe that I am uncomfortable, not so much that I would vote against this, that the orderly development is creating a lot which the 2 commissioners on my right pointed out earlier. We're creating a lot whose buildable envelope is very much compromised. And it's compromised because it has a 96-inch multi-trunk bay tree in the middle, which is not a heritage oak and it's not a redwood. And under the state findings for a variance, one could easily go for a variance to the buildable lot lines, because you have a classic situation of a characteristic of the lot that makes it different from any other lot in the neighborhood, and you can't enjoy the same basic rights as your neighbors. With that said, it's not a terrific tree. And I think if the city required, as I've seen sometimes, really extensive planting, it doesn't have to be a tree with a 96-inch diameter that gets moved in on a giant forklift. I think they could do a good landscape plan, and the neighborhood would benefit in general. So with that, I will say that I also support, and I would propose an additional condition, hopefully will be supported, that if they're going to go to the trouble to take down the non-conforming property line, non-property line fence that's intertwined with the bushes, that at the same time they do what our engineering department prefers in high-traffic zone, particularly for kids on bikes, and cut back the bushes such that the view corridor between Covington and Miramonte is made clear and maintained that way. those are my comments. Thank you.
I would also like to compliment both the applicant and Walter for this design. I think it's my view of the property, including I happen to live on Rinconada, and I can tell you that the house on Rinconada was in terrible repair, and it was through the sale of the land around that house that the new owner, the developer, was able to put over $500,000 into it just to do things like make the porch level again, put a new roof on, make the kitchen more modern. I mean, things that had not been done for 30, 40 years. And quite honestly, when I looked at your house, it looked like it could use some love and attention. And I think this is actually, even though it would be great to have it be on a big piece of property like it once was, it's just not practical from an economic point of view. And I think you're going to end up, and the neighborhood is going to end up with something that's a lot better, even though it'll be on a smaller piece of property. I am concerned about the fact that we are setting ourselves up for having to have a large tree removed, but I think were the landscaping of whatever development goes into that piece of property, if it were done properly, I think having that tree removed could be compensated for. I would actually love to see something put into the conditions that, something to the effect that if the tree needs to be removed for architectural reasons, that compensating foliage or landscaping be included. That's really dependent on whether or not the other commissioners agree to that. But in general, I absolutely support this. I think it's a great compromise, and I think it's going to end up being a great project.
So like my fellow commissioners, I also agree that kudos for the creative way that you've approached this, trying to finance your upgrade from Loma Prieta to put in a better foundation. And I lived on a 2-story house that had to be uplifted in a floodplain, and it's amazing what they can do with a crane to lift those things off. To reinforce or to also apply to also reverberate what I heard before my last two commissioners, I would like to see that we put something in about tree number 20 in our conditions. I'm not sure what that would look like, but because I'm afraid that if we approve this, that it may go in front of somebody that never thinks about that tree, and it gets removed, and nobody has a chance to say, we should be either replacing it or doing something with it, because I think that bay tree is going to be part of that next subdivision. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the visibility of your home. I mean, one of the things that I was really surprised is how little you can see from the street, and it's really difficult. And I think this is such a wonderful building to see, and when you are done, I know that corner is a real bad corner as far as traffic, and I know that you want to protect and buffer your house, but maybe down Covington, it would be nice that the shrubbery or something, and I don't think it needs to be a condition, I just bring it up to give you some thought about that, is to lower the hedge lines a little bit so you can see into the house, because it's going to be a beautiful structure when you move it and the way it looks. It's just a shame because you really can't see it at the moment. I also would like to see, though, that the visibility on that corner, since we are removing the fence, that we look at also lowering those trees so that the visibility of that area. And I know that in the future, there's going to be a major construction for that corner. So I hope that staff would take that into account in whatever goes forward so that we can take as much of this opportunity. If we're removing things, now's the time to remove as much as we need to going forward. That's pretty much it.
Can I ask just a quick question
Sure.
on that, since it's come up twice? These bushes and stuff are actually in the public right-of-way, aren't they?
Yes.
Because we are moving the fence to
On
go on.
Maramani, they are. In Covington, they are not.
Yeah, but the fence we are moving is
Is on
from the
Maramani.
public right-of-way, and we're moving it back. So I'm just
We're
saying that
removing the fence, not moving it.
we're removing it, but I'm saying all the bushes and things there are in public right-of-way. So it's the city.
On one side, not the other.
Yeah, on
Only
one
on
side.
one of the streets.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, I'm also supportive of this application. I agree. I think you've done a really excellent job in coming up with a way to preserve your property when, it's not designated as a historical building, but you clearly have a lot of love for it. And despite its foundation problems and roof repairs and patching and painting and termite and all the work that you're going to have to do, it's obviously a labor of love that you're interested in doing that and coming up with a resourceful way of coming up with the funds in order to finance it. I'm supportive of this subdivision. That is our mandate. If we don't allow subdivisions in the city, we will not be accommodating the inevitable growth that we are experiencing. So this is exactly the type of subdivision that we are supposed to be encouraging. And it goes even one step further because it's not a subdivision where they are plowing down a building and putting on 2 new buildings, but lifting up and moving a 100-year-old structure and then preserving and enhancing it and allowing a new family to move into Los Altos next
And better
door.
orientation.
So I'm totally supportive of it. Tree number 20, I don't know that we need to make comment on it. I don't object if that's the direction the commission wants to go, but I can't imagine a scenario where a 96-inch tree would be removed and staff wouldn't be very specific about what would need to replace it. That doesn't go under the radar in any commission or staff meeting. And then in terms of the corner, I think I am in favor of encouraging greater visibility for traffic. I would not impose on the homeowner a requirement that they make it more visible and diminish their privacy. I mean, we have situations where neighbors, when they're building a second-story home, we put, windows that you can't see through and make them higher than 5 feet. But here, because it's a corner lot, it would seem unreasonable to ask them to, throw open and remove whatever privacy shading they have just to give people a view, particularly because it's a very busy trafficked corner. But to the extent that any shrubbery or landscape makes it difficult for traffic or for the kids and the school commuters, then I would support that.
Phoebe, you had a suggestion, so I'm just coming back to that because before somebody makes
Are you going to craft a
motion. No, I'm not. I'm just asking. Your suggestion of that we put it in that tree number 20, if removed, has something, I'm just thinking, kind of talking out loud right now, that if this subdivision is done, this tree is definitely something which is not going to be looked upon nicely if whoever's buying this, and is going to work in circles trying to figure out how to, and eventually it will be removed. That seems pretty obvious, but just getting this property to look better with this huge tree. So is there a way, would the commissioners be up to at least putting in our approval that, we don't mind the removal of this quite interesting tree? I love trees, but this tree, I think we can do better with something nicer. But just put a condition, or at least somewhere in our approval, that we are okay if this does get removed, but
Well,
we
if
take
we
a
don't,
straw poll?
if we don't protect it, then that's not an issue. And I agree completely with Renee that it would be unusual, to say the least, and I think pretty much non-existent, for someone to get permission to remove this tree as part of the development of a new lot and expect that they're going to get away with
my concern
little
is opposite.
sprigs.
My concern is opposite. My concern is if we don't put anything in it,
It will
and we
be
are
protected.
approving, it will be a hindrance that it might not get. If it's a 2-story home,
Right.
with everybody coming through, that
I agree
they
with
will
that.
not be able to remove this
Well, we
tree.
can't really dictate to staff that they should
allow
this
removal.
tree, I mean, is that our purview?
I think, what Monica's
What I'm
suggesting
saying is that
we-
as planning commission.
We
with
say
this
we don't have an
subdivision,
objection to the removal of the tree.
Removal of the tree, so
Well, we could
it's.
do that,
in-
but that's about it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what
Well,
I'm saying. So
Mike-
it's there.
You could actually, I mean, it's related to the development potential on the property. If this tree was of a quality, I mean, it's a fair to poor tree, despite its size and grandeur.
Correct.
And so, in our mind, it was a tree that would very likely be removed, but would be subject to design review and could quite possibly be retained if somebody was creative and wanted to do that, and would certainly need to be replaced if it was removed with a significant tree or two as appropriate. But if this, commission felt this tree was significant enough, it's within your purview to protect it. And you could.
We're going the
It's like
opposite.
We sometimes will bring subdivisions to you with a modified building envelope that protects a stately tree. And that's, so you can protect it with your action on the subdivision.
So-
You
Can be
just be neutral
unprotected.
on it.
So the lack
Or
of-
you could have a condition that would recognize, and I think the condition would be appropriate to say something along the lines of, should tree number 20 be removed with the future development, it shall be replaced in a significant manner as determined necessary by the appropriate body, and then it's a signpost that you're anticipating its removal, you're not requiring it to remain or be removed, and it's something that we'll flag as it goes through, because the condition of approval would be.
I think
Can
that's
we
a great idea.
revert it?
And my concern is, when we approved the Third Street project, if you remember, nobody with the pine tree was going to get removed until we brought it up that we wanted something in there, so in case it did go away, it would be restored.
Correct.
And that's what my concern is, just,
And would
So
that
what
satisfy you?
I think
I'm
it's.
sorry?
Would that satisfy you?
Absolutely.
No, but what I'm saying is, can we-
Yes, it is perfect.
Can we rephase it rather than saying if that tree is removed, say, the tree can be removed but needs to be replaced with this? That leaves an option. And the reason I'm saying is because I've seen quite a few projects where if you have a second story and it comes in, the neighbors and the city, and it will make difficult for somebody to then develop. If it was a beautifully healthy tree, I would rather not put any condition because I'll rather see if they can design around it. But I'm just saying, rather than saying if the tree, can we say tree can be removed if, certain vegetation is
I
wanted
could
in?
support that because, as I
I
said,
could
I had a
too.
concern about orderly development.
Yeah.
And if we're creating in the subdivision a lot that has a significant encumbrance,
Then we're
then I
limiting
don't believe
the sale of-
it
Right.
fits completely into the definition of
I agree with
orderly
that, too.
subdivision.
So I think that's
I
fine.
agree.
Okay.
That's fine.
You wanna make a motion?
I think all we're trying to do is just
Give options.
flag the fact that we understand the tree's there, the tree is important. If it has to go for whatever reason, then let's make sure there's some compensation.
and that tree would be, the newer tree would be placed relatively in the same area? I mean, I hate.
Well, it's,
I wouldn't
no,
do
no,
that.
I don't think, it doesn't.
No, no,
have to
not
be
the
a
same
tree.
area, but I mean by, in the front rather than the back?
Well, I think
So
at
that's along
some
the
point,
street?
I
at some
think
point
we have to leave DRC to do
allow
their stuff.
the
Okay.
commission and staff some leeway,
Yeah.
because it may be the design of the house will change.
Yeah, I think that's.
I think we're trying to avoid a second bite at the apple in terms of
We
Yeah.
don't want, I'm
deciding the
just asking,
subdivision.
that's up to the.
And I
We're
also-
approving the subdivision, and we don't want to later commit somebody to say
This is necessary.
objectively, they're not going to allow the subdivision because they are keeping the tree in the center of the lot.
Gotcha.
And correct,
Which
and
case
that's,
you will have expended a lot of effort in moving and will not be able to get
Someone want to try?
someone to buy it based on that.
Someone want to try a motion? Want me to do it?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay. So, and in regards to 980 Covington, I make a motion to,
Recommend?
I recommend that we accept the conditions as outlined by staff, with the exception that I believe it's number 6.
Yes,
Yep.
6.
That in condition number 6, that in the event
Oh,
that...
no.
no, that's 6 is separate. That's what Phoebe brought up,
6
right?
is, there's a, it was miswritten, all existing trees except
Okay,
the
in
two
regards
previously
to
noted.
tree number 20,
You
No,
can
no.
add it to that one, I suppose.
in regard to, is it tree number, it's tree
It's tree number 20.
In
No, but
regard to tree number 20, that in the event that any future development calls for a removal of that tree, and staff approves that adequate measures be taken in order to, how should we put that?
Compensatory landscape.
Replace in kind?
Would you take
No.
a suggestion?
Compensatory landscape.
Problem with replacing in kind is it can't be.
No, because then you get one big tree. We
Then you
may
don't
not
want
want
big-
one
Which you
big tree.
can't, I mean, that's huge. But can I suggest a change?
Yes.
So if we can reword it saying that, rather than saying that if the tree is removed and staff supports it, not that I have any problem with staff supporting it, but I would rather phrase it that the tree can be removed, may be removed for future development.
Better.
And if it
not-
is, then we would like to see
Compensating landscaping.
Compensatory landscape
as decided by staff.
for staff.
Or, yeah.
Okay.
And the
Now,
other
and the other
suggestion
part of
is that condition 6, that trees number 4 and
And-
21 will be removed
Yes.
As part of this.
That's
as
it.
part of the subdivision.
And what about the
Zach,
corner
did you get
visibility? Did someone want to propose?
Yes.
And we'll get these
And I
minutes
propose a
before.
friendly amendment that we have engineering review
The
the
corner.
landscape plans with the guidance towards clearing the view corridor for students and pedestrians
At the corner of,
at the corner of Miramonte and Covington.
I can second that.
Okay.
did you get all that?
Whatever
All in
that was.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nate?
It passes
Congratulations.
6-1.
I'm sorry, who got the second on that?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. I'm sure John can tell you stories about the branches that they had to remove off of that tree over the years, so it's...
I've got two redwood trees that dwarf my house. I know about branches, particularly with this last storm.
I bet.
Thank you again.
But
Thank
Walter,
you.
you have maintained
Good
your
luck with the
record.
project.
You have never come before us without asking for a variance. No, you're good, Walter, you're good, you're good.
Continue on with our meeting.
This board is forward, right?
Yeah.
Get
Why we're here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good luck.
Moving on to the
How you doing?
next item on discussion, which is clearly of
Story polls, the fun stuff.
tremendous interest to the public and community.
Who have
Story
all,
polls.
who have all left?
David,
Okay,
tell
story polls.
us about the polls.
Did everybody go see the polls?
Thank you. This item comes to you from the City Council as part of their follow-up discussion on open government. They recommended that, or they directed the commission to look at the use of story polls for its development review. And so, this is a topic that the city's reviewed in the past on occasion, and it's been a discussion of the utility of the polls in terms of benefiting the design review process versus the cost of providing them versus in some cases, the accuracy or clarity of what's being presented with the polls versus whether we have other tools at our disposal to review things like 3D dimensional drawings and photo montages and that kind of thing. So as this has come up, the council's decided, up to this point, that the three-dimensional renderings and so forth were a more appropriate way to consider the development review. But I think in terms of their considering the downtown development and some of the newer council members, there's been a discussion topic about whether we should be using story polls or not. So we're presenting this concern for you to provide a recommendation to the council. It wouldn't really be staff's recommendation to use the polls, especially in the commercial context.
It is or is not?
Is not.
Okay.
So David, are you only asking us about the commercial context or?
It is
in
just for
general?
commercial.
Well, it would be commercial and multiple family. It would be for.
It's not for residential.
It's whatever we have.
Whatever goes before the
Jurisdiction, right.
commission. I mean, council used the term for commercial purposes, but I think we wouldn't differentiate if we were going to adopt such a policy. And it's used in some communities with success in terms of hillside communities and coastal communities where you have views and in some cases public views and bluffs where locating the structure is very important. And in staff's view, defining the actual building itself with these poles, really, it's probably not the best way to do it. And we've seen examples over the years in adjacent communities, and sometimes they're very good, and other times they're not. And there are standards we could adopt if we wanted to go that way. And Los Gatos has a very rigorous set of standards. Los Altos Hills has a set of standards that aren't quite as rigorous. But I cited a couple of examples nearby, so hopefully you had a chance to look at those in terms of considering this. And I took a few pictures of them, so in case if you didn't get a chance, or you can see the context of what we were looking at. But I think it's our recommendation that we rely on what we have been. The computer graphics and photo montages have really come a long way. We think those are a little better at figuring out the context of design, and there is some difficulty in doing these in a taller. These examples are probably up to 30 feet, and it's difficult to do them well. And if we're going to do them on commercial development that's 45 feet, I have some reservations about how accurate it would be and how useful it would be.
At earthquakes.
And then there's other issues too in terms of just the material use, and when they're not maintained, they tend to be a blight, or even when they are up, some people think they're a blight.
So, David, I mean, I think that certainly in Los Altos Hills, and as you point out, in other places where a view could be an issue for neighbors and so forth, it's probably, and the structures do tend to be more massive structures. I think it's maybe appropriate, but for the kind of things that we review here, I think it would be crazy. I think from forgetting about whether or not it makes any sense, just from an implementation point of view, imagine story poles for the hotel that went in, on the corner of Main and Edith.
So here's a
That would
question.
be
What's the
wacko.
problem that council thinks needs to be solved?
Exactly. That can't be solved by
Well,
photo.
not even that, but just,
photo-
this is a
realistic-
response. This is a response to something.
I'm presuming, well, maybe if you know, why don't you?
That's why I was going to ask
Yeah,
David, do you have a
I'm-
sense of what
Doesn't
council's...
sound like they have a position on this.
Well, it's
I think it's a discussion which came up.
It's a discussion topic for them, and I think, the discussion topic has to do with the development downtown and whether that was, as expected and in the plans and all of that, and whether story poles would help create a better understanding of the development.
So it's been
And
my
I'm not sure council's saying, we have to do this or not. They're asking us to consider its use.
So it's been my observation that being on this commission, and we've had a lot of buildings come through us in the last 3 years, and I think looking at the surrounding buildings and looking at what's proposed, that this commission has done an awesome job of really understanding that
Right.
beyond.
And when they don't do a good job, we have a watchdog who yells at them.
If the rendering aren't right, et
Yes,
cetera.
if they're not right, we...
But I think if I look at like story poles, I think that first in San Antonio project, if you put a big pole up in the ground and you put orange across the top, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, think,
I don't know if it
story
would help
poles
me.
on First Street.
Exactly.
And see if that makes any sense. Suppose, turn the clock back 3 or 4 years, and we're talking about
400 Main.
400 Main and the Safeway building, and we're going to put story poles up for those? Are you kidding me?
Well,
That's ridiculous.
Well, both of you are saying what I think, I asked what the problem was, because the story pole setup is a tool, and it's a tool particularly used in residential, in hillside communities where view and solar access are critical.
Right.
And even then, the reason they're bright orange is so that you
So you
can
can
prove
follow
that
it.
they're actually there. In reality, usually the structure is less conspicuous, and so the orange makes it the worst possible condition.
Right.
But with that said, it's a tool of a scale and for a kind of building that is not appropriate, in my opinion, in a downtown urban setting. And so I look at this and say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? If there is a part of our community who are very upset at the development on First Street, would story poles have changed anything that went
Exactly.
through?
Exactly.
And I don't believe that's true, and I do believe that it's taken us some time, but I think we work together very well as a body. When someone comes in and their renderings are not sufficient to make an informed decision, we basically spank them and send them home.
You know, I think the proof to this is that, I know in my 6 years of being on this commission, I can't think of one person that came up here and said, you know, I wish you guys would have put red poles up there so I could have had a more informed decision. No one has requested that of us, so
Yeah, but-
to think that we should
But
do.
they may not, may not know that as a possibility.
Okay, that's a possibility, but
I mean, I've seen them in Los Altos Hills, and there are certain parts of Los Altos Hills I think it's probably not a bad idea. In fact, David suggested one that you can actually see from 280.
And that's why they put those orange.
Yeah, and you know
So
what?
you can see.
I'm like not real happy that's where that house is going to be, but, you know, at least I can see there's going to be a house there.
And it won't be orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it might be. It's, you know, it's Los Altos Hills.
But how accurate is that? I mean, just like David said, I mean,
Well, it gives you, it
No,
gives
but-
you an
It's
idea.
sense of volume.
But
It's the biggest volume you're
That's
gonna-
the discussion that you're talking about 3-acre or 1-acre parcels with having something there that even if it's a foot off, it's not the big, they're looking at an overall
Right.
bulk.
Right.
But coming back, I think rather than, just looking at it as downtown, and even if it's not our downtown, like commercial application, it is going to confuse people more than try and help.
Exactly.
And not everybody can imagine things easily, and if we put these things up, I think it was a good suggestion
And
and
as a-
thought process that the council had, but up here, I think all of us have seen a lot of these projects go through. Some of us actually deal with story poles every day.
Well, not
I have
every day,
4
but I'm
projects in
aware
Los
of it.
Altos Hills where we have our story poles up on our projects, but it's there and it's perfect for that. You can drive up, you can see it from a distance, you can walk around it. In downtown, you're squished between things. No matter how big a project is, the bulk is not going to help us. It's a
Well,
strong tool. So I
And
don't think
And I
that.
think like the Packard building, right, if you put story poles, how could you
Oh,
describe
we
the
would have
beauty of
had
that, right?
tons of people
Right.
disapproving that project.
Right,
Because
when we
it
look.
It would have not gotten
Exactly.
approved.
But yet,
Anyway.
within our.
So I think mosquito netting has value, but not in the context of design review.
Yeah.
And, even when we see buildings going up and we see the basic framing, I get nervous, right? Because you look at it and say, oh my God, and we know this from residential, we know it from commercial development, that until the building is framed, until it's landscaped, until it's done, you really don't know what it looks like. And right now, for better or worse, the best tool that we have are the 3D renderings.
Yeah.
And they're not perfect, and we're getting a lot smarter so that we don't get snookered quite as often.
They're getting to be better.
But mosquito netting ain't going to help us, and I don't think it's going to help the community either.
By the way, you know what?
I
What the
think
big,
we've-
what the big boys do is they actually build a section of a wall. So if you go to, I've seen this on the Stanford campus several times, when they're building
you
a
said, big
building,
boys.
There is actually a section of a wall, maybe 2 stories high, and it's a corner, and it has windows and doors and everything.
Oh, they're
built
checking
into it.
finishes, is what,
Pardon me?
they're checking finishes, is what
Yeah,
they're
and
doing.
but they're showing you
Mock-ups.
what the building is going to be like. when
Ken,
it's finished.
that's why it's big boys. What we don't want to do is scare the developers from downtown.
Even if we did, it's
These
also on a
up.
campus. That point you made about being able to see it from a distance
Right.
is totally why, as a tool, it's inappropriate in a downtown setting.
So,
So
Rudy,
I think you've heard a resounding
No.
No.
so our recommendation
Sorry.
to council is that we prefer the way things are? Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
I think we've
Well-
given a lot of good reasons for
Yeah.
why it is not a good
it's good.
tool.
Viable
We have
tool.
the photolithographic simulations.
Yeah, we like to keep going with technology
Yep.
Right.
and going that way rather than going
Wait a
backwards.
minute, John, are you on board here?
He said yes.
Are you embracing the future?
Are you embracing this
As I
concept?
told you, mosquito netting has value,
But
but
not-
not in the
Now,
context
if
of
we
what we
did,
do.
if we did historic polls, would you be more into it?
Like the
You know,
Venetian.
no one even mentioned this, but, you know, I'm probably more sensitive to this, but do developers need one
Right.
more cost? You've got to pay for a library, you've got to pay for public parks, you've got to pay for sewer, you've got to pay for streets. Do you need to pay for a pole?
I know, I just wanted to remind her.
And then
We have
scared
other-
half of the people
All right,
away.
so we have resolved the story poll question.
So do you need something from us?
I think you got
Do you
it.
need a vote?
Do you need
No,
a,
we don't, no.
I think
the-
he'll
we'll-
review.
we don't need to make a motion or anything.
Okay.
Okay.
He's heard.
We'll summarize the recommendation.
Great.
And it's good input. I think the council, you know, values the, you know, the perspective.
About
And I think
story
that-
Romanians.
Well,
All right.
moving forward, it's not backwards.
Commissioner reports and comments.
I have some because I was not present last time. Ronit was supposed to meet the mayor,
Right,
right? And then you had asked me to go.
right.
So we.
Thursday morning, right.
Yes.
In what regard?
So it was, I think, the mayor was meeting all the chairs of all the commission together to just see if everything was working good.
At 8 a.m.
Now, I could be totally wrong what I stated there, but compared to everybody there, it looked like we were doing pretty good. Because it apparently there was a huge disconnect for most of the commissioners with their staff person, and there was very little communication between all of them. And I stated I don't think we had that issue at all. The staff
And
kind of
told
keeps
them that
us.
we like David?
We love David.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, and not only David.
And James and Zach.
And let's call
Focusing on
everyone.
our connection and communication with the staff person who's kind of, so it looked like, and so I was actually very happy that we were the ones who were doing it. Everybody else was pretty sad about how their communication was going. There was none. And the commission that we met before that, they were there and they were not happy with how things were going, which was forgot which commission we met. It was.
It doesn't matter, right?
No, bicycle and pedestrian. So they were really unhappy with their communication. The other thing they were talking about was how all the commissioners were in each commission working together. And again, you guys can think maybe I was wrong, but I was like, you know, we all have our own mindset and we all have our opinions. But the great thing is that even though we would differ from each other, we have a very good balance, and everybody respects everybody else's feedback, regardless
Even Congress.
what we have. But that wasn't the case in some of the commissions. I was really happy to see that. But overall, I think it was just, the mayor was just wanted to see how things are going, how to improve the communication, and if anybody should be talking to anybody else. And it was just a way for her to get to know.
Did she
everybody.
talk about one of our regular meetings? We usually try to have twice-a-year meetings with
So they
council.
touched upon a little bit. It was a very informal setting at
Okay.
the cafe, but her thing was just to get to know, and she took notes on suggestions. So people said maybe we should meet more. Bicycle pedestrian was talking about our meeting. So it was more focused on what everybody's feedback was on their own commission, plus how they can be kind of communicating with the council,
Okay.
and what
Okay.
her scope was. So that was that.
Thank you. Any other reports?
So I attended the February 10th City Council meeting. The most notable thing, which is not directly related to us, is the design review, which had, a design review had been appealed by the neighbors, which was unusual. It had been heard by council. Council had voted to deny the appeal, and the neighbors came back at the February 10th council meeting saying they were still unhappy, and council voted to put it on the calendar for reconsideration to decide whether they were going to agendize it at the next meeting. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, David.
Which
and
project?
if so, then they would, the city council said then it has to be taken up immediately. So they will decide whether they're going to consider it at the February 24th meeting, and if they vote to consider it, then they will hear the appeal
Again.
again.
So I was at the meeting before that when it was heard
Right.
the first time, and it's literally 3 windows facing, and I mean,
Right.
it's a
So,
appeal and a discussion and
right.
another
So what was
appeal and
interesting that-
discussion about that.
But what was interesting was the number of the people who had voted in favor of the denial voted to
Reopen
Think-
it.
reopen
Reopen the
it.
case.
So I just, I leave it without comment, but I
Oh
thought
my
that was
God.
of note.
Sounds like a cold case.
I do have something to bring up about this, which is I am the rep on the next city council meeting, which is the 24th, and I have discovered today that I'll be flying to the East Coast. And so if anybody else would be willing to take that meeting, I'll swap another one. I'm just putting it out there.
If you send the email out, I'll look and see if I just don't.
I probably can. If you-
I'll send a group email out. I think I'm allowed to do that.
Mike is going for the record attendance at city council meetings, I think.
Well, only
No.
if the issues that interest him are there. He doesn't go if he's not interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's gone to all of them where I am, and I'm like, I should next time just call him. He's going, I'm like, go for it.
Yeah, but I don't stay for the whole meeting, and I don't represent the Planning and Transportation Commission. Anyway, I have 2 things to share with the committee. One was that the Los Altos Community Foundation lead class asked me, first they'd asked the chair and the vice chair if they were available, and I was the de facto who was there, to share what the Planning and Transportation Commission does, how we act, what things come before us, and to educate the classes about what we do. And so they were I received very positive feedback afterwards that everybody really enjoyed hearing from that and
Great.
and the value that we play in the city. The second thing is Mr. Cornfield and I are going to be gone at the next meeting in March 4th, 5th, and 6th to Newport Beach for the Planning Commission from the League of Cities meeting down there. It's a training. So I will not be here, and I've asked that I should be counted not as an absentee vote because obviously I'm doing commission business in Newport.
Because we have a March 5th meeting.
We do have a March 5th meeting.
And David was
With one
very
item on
concerned
the
about
agenda.
that. Yeah.
Yes, and I think
Do we have a quorum?
Do we have a quorum? So
Quorum,
that's
yeah,
2. You do have a quorum?
We have a quorum, so we're going to go ahead and agendize an item regarding the 400 Main Street sign program. And thank you for
Ken is not
for
going to be
allowing
there
a
either.
single item. We know we don't like to take you out just for one item, so.
And I would have attended
You
remotely,
always-
but that was not,
You going to Newark, New Jersey?
I'm teasing.
Newport.
Newport Beach.
Newport
Because I thought you
Beach.
said Newark.
I'm going to John Wayne's.
Planning and surfing.
No, it's next to John Wayne, it's next to John Wayne's airport. It's not even like
Sounds like
downtown
fun.
Newport.
Any
Anyway.
potential future agenda items?
Well, the only thing that I would like to reinforce that we could put in the March 19th meeting is the 2015 work plan. I keep bringing that up, and I haven't seen anything
Yeah,
else.
Yeah.
We were going to do it on the 5th, but
Thank you.
Yeah. And
I'm moving that to the second meeting in March so we can hopefully have a full attendance on the work plan. So we should be thinking about that. The council does not need to approve our work plan now, but I think it's important to communicate to them what we want to do in April, so we'll prepare for that. Some of the upcoming meetings we have, and we're also looking at a study session format
I'll deal with it and get home. Thanks.
I think it might be in later March or early April, for stormwater runoff and going through the various regulations that we have, and just to summarize,
If
There's
it ever
three
rains
sets-
again?
There's 3 sets of regulations we use for stormwater runoff.
Crazy.
And I'll have one of the engineers attend and go through that. And those are the highlights of some of the things we're doing.
So I have a question. We had asked, and probably sometime in the fall, that we agendize the not the criteria, how much, when a remodel comes to PTC, where we've had a number of downtown properties which have been reviewed at the staff level, and what that criteria is. Presently, there's some
500 square feet.
square footage or something that determines it.
Yes.
And I haven't seen that on the agenda. I'm wondering where we are in that process.
You haven't seen it because I think you were absent on that.
Yeah,
Because what?
we had a meeting.
Right, we did
I'm
discuss
sorry.
it.
It was on the agenda.
We had the meeting
Okay.
And you were there.
8
I
weeks
wasn't
ago
there.
or something, and unfortunately, I think you were absent. What
Okay.
I will do is, we prepared some materials for that. I will forward those.
Okay, thank you.
And
It's probably the only meeting I've missed in the last 9 months.
I remember
How dare
actually
you.
the discussion.
Yeah, we were laughing, you like,
We actually
you're the one who had
The fact
asked.
that it was your item.
Yeah, that's classic.
We are adjourned.
Okay.
All right.